Cube reporting to me, you made the joke, this is, other people can learn this, right? And I actually think we're in a world now that you don't need to know SQL. Yeah, if you want to build a SQL reporting services report, you kind of have to follow through that conversation. But the Cube reports, it gives us and enables people that are on the business side, managers, directors, CIOs, the ability to measure and wrap their business around this Cube model that allows for us to really visualize the data almost instantaneously. So what we'll do here is, I don't have Excel on my server, so I'm gonna bounce over to my workstation here. And when I'm in my data warehouse area for cubes, I have this option inside of cubes. When I highlight a particular cube, so there's different cubes for different work items. If I want to actually highlight a cube and analyze that in Excel, I'll highlight that cube, I'll analyze it in Excel.
And those cubes that you have there, are there defaults that come
Yes.
out of the box? Okay.
Great question. Sorry about that. These are all default that comes out of the box. However, just like
data warehouse,
yep, just like data warehouse reports, you have the ability to build your own cubes if you want to.
Okay.
So you can do that. Once I actually click Analyze Cube in Excel, what will happen is that'll pop out to an Excel file, and I actually stage this because my little demo kit takes about a minute to pop out. It's trying. It's a little engine that could, but effectively, what will happen is it'll pop out in Excel, and then I can actually start slicing and dicing the data. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can manage this. I'm going to give just a couple of just really quick examples, but you'll see here that I have all my DIM tables, and I can slice and dice the data across incidents, problems, changes, service requests, so on and so forth, across each one of these DIM fit tables. We've been talking about incident management, so I'm going to keep the theme simple, and I'm going to run against my incident DIM cube. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to select incident DIM count. And when I do that, it's going to give me a number of incidents that I have. Now, I have a demo kit, so it's 224 incidents. But if you had an environment that was enterprise scaled and ready, what you're going to see here is the ability to do some really good reporting without any level of effort. And the ability to slice and dice the data on that level without having to do any SQL is where the real power is here.
Right.
So what I'll do here is I'll select my incident DIM count, and then I'll say, I'm curious about the top 10 incidents in my particular environment. So I'll come down here, and I'll find my classification categories. There they are. And I'll go ahead and click, incident classification value. And immediately, I can see that from a category perspective, I have 84 that are configuration data problems, I have 24 that are email problems, and I have 45 that are enterprise application problems. Now, in my presentation, I said, why is category structure the most important thing? Well, because when you're actually measuring the business, this is what you're going to get, the output, right? Now, out of the box, incident management has some basic categories, but you should really build categories that measure your business, because if you don't, after you implement this 6 months later, guess what? You're going to have data that just does not make sense. So if you have very specific data and your company actually embraces classification category, 6 months from now, you're just going to know exactly what's going on in your environment to the T. So it's a very important, it's a very important thing to remember when you're actually building your category structure.
All right, and you mentioned, hey, if your company gets larger and has a lot of data that's in there, when is it that I noticed there's a report filter and some other things there, and for you, 224 incidents, it comes up pretty quickly, but let's say you have 100,000 incidents in there. How can you kind of gauge to know, when I should, what kinds of queries I should do, or maybe when is it going to kind of keel over and maybe take a long time to pull something up? Yeah,
and the thing to remember is first there's a scaling guide that talks about how to actually architect this. And it's really straight math. The amount of work items you have, the amount of config items you have, the amount of incidents, problems, changes, service requests you plan on building, that will give you the output of how you should scale your architecture.
Even for reporting as well?
Even for reporting, yeah. So in that scaling guide that was demonstrated earlier in these presentations, you saw a data warehouse area that showed you your data mart needs to be X amount of gigs, your blah, blah, blah needs to be Y amount of gigs. The other parts of that is, okay, so disk I/O may no longer be the bottleneck, but now we got to start thinking about CPU, memory, things like that. And there's a lot of read-writes happening in the data warehouse constantly.
Yeah.
So we talk about scale up and scale out, right? So if I'm doing a lot of reporting, should my data mart be on a separate SQL server? that actually has a lot more horsepower to be able to run these reports, that's a question that's up to the business, but it feeds into your example, right? So there's variables shifting through all of that.
Okay, because so when you do, to tie this specifically to what you just mentioned, when you run these cube reports, the cube reports, all of the heart of the work is really being done on the data mart. Is that right?
Exactly. Well, the data mart and the cubes themselves. The data mart, the cubes bring the information out of the data mart into the actual cubes themselves.
On the Excel file, right?
Into the Excel file. Well, we are querying the cubes on the fly.
Okay.
So we're saying, I want to see how many I have of incident dim. I want to see that sliced by classification category.
Okay, so Excel is mainly just pulling it from the network, from the cube. Okay, and where are the cubes running at?
On the reporting server.
On the reporting server.
Which you can scale out and scale up as well.
Okay, okay.
And honestly, don't think of Excel any different than you would think of SQL Query Analyzer. Right? I ran a select statement that said, give me all the stuff in the user dim table. There's no difference between that particular select statement and saying, I want classification category. I'm building a query on the fly and bringing back data.
Just a lot more friendly, I think, for business folks to check a checkbox than know a select or a joint statement.
It is a lot more friendly, for sure. Now, for all you managers out there, this is what everyone gets really excited about. So I can actually then take this stuff and put a pivot chart onto the data, start visualizing that particular data. And you mentioned this.
That's when you click that's when the audience and maybe the audience here goes, ooh, right? That's a pie graph or a
whatever it may be.
That's whatever, yeah.
And then I also have the ability to do filters. So I want to actually filter by create date. So then I can actually say, okay, well, I don't care about certain months, certain days, certain years, so I can actually start deselecting some of this stuff and filter out the data. Or maybe I don't care about certain classification categories. I can filter out the data. Now, you'll see here, this is a bad example of how to actually do incident management. I have a ton of blank ones, which is skewing my data. So maybe I want to get rid of my blank ones and reanalyze the data to be a little more visually normalized. So for someone that knows SQL, yeah, it's great that you can get into SQL and do all that fun stuff, but who wants to? There's no reason to. Now you have an engine that can give you checkboxes and build pivot tables, and it's really a powerful way to actually report against not only Service Manager, but to feed into what you said really earlier, Config Manager, Operations Manager, and all the things in between.
Well, and I could also see, though, you mentioned there's a table for all the different table names. That kind of still somewhat plays into this, too, in that, some of the names of the fields that you're going to want to include, you might want a little more connection there, right, to what you need to click on to find what you need, right?
It's a little more friendly as well, and if you know how to build a pivot table, and a lot of managers and directors out there are really good at Power Pivot. If you know Power Pivot, this should just come naturally to you in building this data out.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's kind of the soups and nuts on the overall reporting engine, the data warehouse, kind of the guts of how it works, how to edit a report, add a column, a little bit ugly, but nonetheless add a column, and work within the cube model.
Okay, so with a cube report, is there a way to automate maybe piping out one of those on a regular basis? Like, hey, every so often I want this nice pie chart graph that pops up and gets sent to me in an inbox or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this takes a couple of steps here, so I'm not going to visualize it step by step.
That's fine.
But basically I have the ability to build an analysis library that actually saves these cube reports. So I can save these cube reports, put them in the analysis library, and when I run these, basically how the cube report is defined, I can actually derive that data automatically and visualize it in the report.
All right, well, this has been really useful. Thanks for coming back for the reporting and data warehousing session. Hopefully by now, after you've gone through all of these modules in the course, you should have a much better understanding of kind of all the core essentials of things you need to do to get running with Service Manager. And check out TechNet and some of the other major resources if you want to learn more. But yeah, thank you, Sean.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.